It seems like every Western movie starts the same way. A person walks into a dusty town. They could be a hero, they could be a villain. Then things happen, and just as quietly, they walk out of that town again in the end. You stop and think about it a bit, and you have an art imitates life situation. We are, as humans, collections of these engagements, of stories of heroes and villains, and parents and siblings and guides walking in and then out of our lives again, leaving some sort of change in their wake. And once in a while, that stranger who walks down your dusty town road is a lawyer. What if legacy isn't about time, but timing? What if the measure of a life isn't how long you're in somebody's story, but how deeply you press into the page while you're there? Seth Nelson is a divorce attorney in Tampa. He doesn't build monuments. He doesn't write laws. He sits beside people when their lives are breaking open. He does his best to resolve conflict and solve problems, and then, just as quietly, he leaves. Seth has helped thousands of people navigate the sharp, disorienting corners of divorce. He's been there in the worst conversations, the hardest decisions, the greatest grief. And then the papers are signed, and he vanishes back into his office to see what's next. But his legacy remains in the way those people rebuild, the way they figure out how to raise their children, the way they learn to love again. So today, I want to talk about the invisible weight we leave behind in the lives we pass through. I'm Pete Wright, and this is Headstone, a show about human legacy and what we leave behind. By way of disclosure, I have to say that Seth is also a very good friend of mine, and I host a podcast with him about the legal side of divorce called How to Split a Toaster. And so I don't know what is going to happen with this conversation we're about to have. It is charted, yet at the same time, wholly uncharted territory for us. Seth, thanks for doing this.
Well, Pete, that was an amazing intro. The best intro that anyone has ever given of me. Usually it's he's the managing partner or he's a short Jewish bald schmuck. So that was very kind. And I'm not usually lost for words, but as you were doing that, I was taking some notes and I felt like I was. So thank you very much for that.
Well, you're welcome very much. Before we started recording, you said that you've been thinking about this conversation more than maybe you expected to have been thinking about this conversation since I invited you to join me on this show. And I'm curious, before I launch into my, cross-examination, what have you been thinking about?
Yeah, so we spoke about the show last week and said, you told me what your concept was. And I'm like, oh yeah, we've had these conversations just as friends.
Right.
And in the 7 to 10 days, I guess, that have passed, the last week or so, I should say, I just found myself thinking about legacy and what I would want on my headstone, on my tombstone. As you know, my parents both passed in the last 3 to 4 years. And that's where you and I started having these conversations. And I just literally found it creeping into my mind at the most peculiar times. I might have been out with friends at a dinner and it would just pop into my head. It might have been just getting ready for work and it popped into my head. It wasn't that like a song triggered it or anything, but it has just been there. In everything you said in the opening is not one of the things I would have thought of in the legacy that I thought I was going to talk to you about. But now that you mention it, like a whole nother avenue has opened.
I'm grateful to hear that. I'm a little bit surprised because when I look at you and the sort of transient nature of your work, you're like a Ronin, right? You're a rogue samurai, just solving problems and moving on. and I think very highly of that. And we're going to talk a little bit about how you ended up in this space in a bit. But my first question for you is in the guise of this, brief relationships held powerfully. When you think back over the architecture of your life, what is the briefest relationship you've ever had that you find still lives inside you?
Man, you ask such good questions. So I have always found that when you look back on your life and you remember somebody from a period of time, that you might not remember what they said specifically or even necessarily an act of kindness that they did specifically, but you certainly remember how that person made you feel, good or bad, if it was meaningful and not someone you just kind of forgot. Um, so I would tell you, I went on a trip in high school. I played soccer in we took a trip to Costa Rica. And on that trip, we got to play a Costa Rican high school soccer team.
Did they
And we
kill
kind of,
you? Did they just
oh,
crush you?
why do you say just because they're Costa Rica, they're better? Like, like, okay, like your legacy is Pete's always a smartass. Okay, I got it. um, so I don't remember the score. Okay,
It's probably
but I
safer.
but I do remember that the game was played much differently. Like they would push off with your hands and grab your shirt and all this stuff that we just didn't do. You would get called on fouls, and our coach was like, "Do what they're doing until you get called for a foul." And I remember that adjustment, but I also just remember one of the players there who was one of their best player, and we kind of went back and forth that game. I didn't speak the language. They spoke broken English, but we just had this profound high school level, if you can, respect for each other in friendship on and off the field, because then they showed us around. We went to their high school for the day. I was following him in his classes. I can't tell you his name. I can't tell you what courses we went to, but when you just asked me a brief encounter that left the biggest impression, that's what came to mind. I have not thought of this since high school.
Isn't it funny too how quickly that comes back?
Just like that. I mean, I
Yeah.
can picture the pitch, the field that we were on. It was kind
Yeah.
of on a hill. It had a fence, so the ball or us couldn't go down the hill because there was like a road underneath,
Yeah. Right.
like I have vivid memories of it that I would not have ever thought of but for you asking that question.
Do you remember when you decided that you needed to be an attorney? Did that come easily?
So I come from a long line of lawyers on my mother's side. My grandmother and grandfather met at Fordham Knight Law School in 1924 is when they graduated. My grandmother. And then on my mom's side, my uncle was a lawyer. My mom was a lawyer, and I'm a lawyer. So there have been consecutively lawyers in our family for now over 100 years.
I can imagine just knowing you as I do, and I've only known you as a lawyer, but there has got to have been a piece of you that looks at that family legacy and said, nah, better not at
Yeah.
some point.
Well, I mean, I knew it instinctively because I knew when they did it. But when I
Yeah.
just recently saw the program of the year from Fordham Fordham Law School about like when you classes start, what are the courses? If you get the highest grade in the class in law school, it's called booking a class. And it said on the program, if you get the highest grade in the class, your reward is $50 in gold. It said in gold. So it was just
Ow.
but I didn't come to the law easily, I will say. When growing up, my mom was a lawyer. I'm like, I never want to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
Like, there's a
That
lot
checks
of
out.
reading, there's a lot of writing, and neither one of those things I enjoyed in high school. But when I was in college, I started studying philosophy and English, which my father would say, how is pre-unemployment coming along? So, um, but I got attracted to those subjects. and those are very much what I do now
Hmm.
because I realized at that time I was not good at just rogue memorization, which was a lot of what learning was back then. I think it's much different now. Um, so to learn every bone in the body in a biology class just seemed miserable to me. But with English and philosophy, you would read a text, you would write about it, you would argue it. I would always do well in the oral quote arguments in courses. Um, and those are all the skills that I use today. And so later in probably my junior year in college, I decided I want to go to law school. And then I graduated. I was going to work for a year, go to law school. I ended up working 6 years, and then I went back to law school.
Can we talk about the card life?
Sure, we can talk about anything you want.
Well,
Um,
it's just you just
l-
like there's a period of your life that feels like a slice from a movie,
yeah.
and your able skill at cards. And I would like somehow to tie that to your experience and success as an attorney, but we have to start by laying out, by setting the table.
So, well, to back up, I went to law school 6 years after graduating from college. And in
Right.
that time, for 3 of those years, I lived on Grand Cayman in the Cayman Islands.
Okay.
So I've had these kind of unique experiences in life that um, others that just go straight through school might not have.
Were you lured down to Grand Cayman? How'd you end up? How do you do that?
I had a job that was helping kids that were in trouble with the law or truancy, and the company would set up alternative schools. And ultimately, they contracted with the Cayman Islands government to set up a school on Grand Cayman for Caymanian kids.
Wow.
And I got transferred down there to help basically run that school. Um, and then that led to another job that I worked for the Caymanian government. And what I did there was kind of oversaw like a nursing home, an orphanage, daycare center. It was called Secretary of the National Council of Voluntary Organizations, and it was a governmental agency that I kind of oversaw those aspects of it. So that all kind of led to this legacy of I got bored. Like Caymans are slow, and I wanted to move things along.
Hmm.
And when I told the chair of the organization that of the board that I was resigning, he goes, "Oh, I'm surprised it took so long. Like you're too eager. We're thankful for the time that we had you, but I want to go to law school, and I always wanted to be on that board.
Yeah.
Like I was that like, what's next? What's better? How can I make a bigger impact? Um, and so I went to law school, graduated, um, got married a year after, had a kid, did a construction project, was a stepdad, sold the house, did another construction project, and just too much change too quickly. I did not handle the part of being a husband as well as I think I should have. I really got lost, and I didn't find who I myself got lost. I was a husband. I was an associate attorney that felt like I was 6 years behind my age group because everyone else went straight through law school and I was
Sure.
fucking off in the Cayman Islands, right? you know, so and I became a stepdad, I became a dad. Like I had all these responsibilities in this just overarching sense of I have to provide and do all these things. And I kind of lost myself, and that's never good, as we talk about on How to Split a Toaster.
Hmm.
And so my marriage ended. I, as you know, am very close with my former spouse. Um, and in that time frame, I hated practicing law. It wasn't what I thought it would be. And that's when the big craze of Texas Hold'em came. When this guy by the name of Moneymaker was on ESPN and won the World Series of Poker as a amateur player.
Hmm.
Um, and I just understand cards. I always have. I grew up watching my parents play bridge. I always played cards growing up. I just understand how they work. I don't know why. And I'm also just like talking to people and meeting people. And I get to kind of evaluate people quickly in what I do. And when you put the card aspect of it with reading people together, I just happen to be a pretty decent poker player.
The stories that I normally hear about people who are pretty decent poker players is that they're actually exceptional poker players who get too in front of their skis.
Oh, so playing cards, and I don't mind sharing this, I was earning, I don't say winning, I was earning six-figure salary, so to speak, by playing poker.
Yeah.
And I read all the books and how to read people and strategy and how the cards work and everything and all the odds.
That sounds pretty good so far.
It's a grind. It's a job.
Yep.
I always say it sounds much better than it was. But what I didn't like about it, and this really goes to the heart of your show, is what am I going to tell my kid? I'm a professional poker player. Like, what am I going to leave behind? And I am not slighting any professional poker players. It's a game. It would be like slighting a professional golfer. You're playing a game for a living, right? But there's skills to it. There's a reason why people win and people lose. It's. I get how people say it's gambling, but what am I really kind of leaving behind? And a lot of those players I played with did very well. It was kind of the same guys at the final table every time. I know some of them were very big into charitable giving and did a lot for society, but on a daily basis, I was taking money, earning money, however you want to say it, from some people that had no business sitting at that card table. And they certainly had no business sitting at the card table with the guys that and women that I were playing with, because they were just totally outgunned. So
that's the piece, right? That you're sitting at that same table and you are objectively overskilled compared to the other people at that table in that game.
Yeah, and listen, nobody forced them to sit down.
Of course.
And if you're at a poker table and you don't know who the fish is, right?
It's you. Yeah.
It's you. So
yeah.
And I don't know if we ever talked about the movie Rounders.
We can't run from ourselves. Our destiny chooses us.
Deal.
In passing, what do you think about Rounders?
Except for the cheating.
Yeah.
That was the life. That movie really depicted a lot of what I was doing on there wasn't the like backroom secret knock, right? Underground poker, but there were those house games that they were going to, that there was a lot of money on the table. And I got to the point where this is not safe. So I just stopped playing those games. And
do you remember the moment you decided I'm done?
Yeah, well, my law practice took off.
So it was more a giant cane exit stage left kind of thing.
Yeah. That was one. And the other one was I started dating my now wife, Susie. And I told her what I did. Like, I was a lawyer. I was doing that, but I was playing cards. And she just looked at me dead in the eye and she goes, "Not on my watch. You're not doing this on my watch." And I explained to her how it all went. She goes, "I know how it works. It's not on my watch." And then she told me her grandfather actually won a bracelet from the World Series of Poker.
No kidding.
And he was, as my brother-in-law told me, he was probably objectively the 20th top poker player in the world. The problem, as my brother-in-law would say, he was playing with the other 19 guys.
Yeah, right. He didn't have to worry about number 21.
Yeah. But Johnny Chan, that's has a cameo in the movie Rounders, actually wrote the bio of my wife's grandfather when he passed in Card Player magazine.
No kidding.
Yeah. So she looked at me and said, "Not on my watch." So I go now, usually in the summer when she's in Chautauqua, which we're both very huge fans of, and where we met. But she goes up there for the summer and I work. And so that's when I'll like maybe on a weekend go play for a day or something, 6-8 hours. But other than that, I don't play that much anymore.
If I want to go to somebody and say, "Hey, I need a good lawyer joke," I'm going to go to you, right? Because lawyers always have the best jokes. They have all the jokes about their own field. There's a certain sort of image that comes to mind when people say, "I'm a lawyer." And that image is not always kind. It's something that's easy to lampoon. And So I'm curious on how you reflect on your work as it in what does and doesn't fit the stereotype, right? Why law? You just told me the story about how you spent 6 years helping kids in the Caymans. Why not social work or education or therapy or something? How did you find, what does being a lawyer mean to you, when your practice started taking off and today?
Part of being a lawyer to me was I wanted to be in the boardroom, right? I wanted to be on the board of the organizations that I were working for. And I felt like I needed skills to be able to contribute at the board level.
Yeah.
And so one of that was getting a JD. Now, that wasn't the only reason, but that was one of the reasons. And when I graduated and I had my law degree, I went back to that same organization I worked for, and they would say, we'd love to have you on the board. Where before, maybe I didn't really have the skill set for it.
Mhm.
So also, there was just this total false narrative that lawyers are smart. I mean, people just like, oh, I want my kid to grow up to be a lawyer or a doctor. And I'm like, no, there's so many other things out there. So I think there's this false sense that I thought, oh, if I'm a lawyer, I'll be smart. Like it made no difference. I am who I am, right? And these are when you're young and you're figuring shit out. But my mother's career was really fascinating and really cannot be distinguished from from her own personality. She was a social worker, and then in the late 70s, early 80s, it was in the 70s. She came home one day, living in Tampa, Florida. My dad was a professor of psychology at University of South Florida. And my mom said, I'm thinking about going to law school. And, her mom had done it. Her dad had done it. Her brother had done it. And said to my dad, well, what do you think? And he goes, I think you should do it. And she goes, well, what do you think about one day I might make more money than you? Because these are conversations that people have in the 70s when it's a man and a wife. And my dad goes, she goes, are you okay with that? He goes, okay with it. I'm counting on it. If you're going to law school, like,
I'm a psych professor, right? We've met, right?
Right.
You know what I do.
Right.
How quickly
Right.
can we get to this point?
That's right. And she was a huge feminist, and my dad supported her every step of the way. And she went to Stetson Law School and would drive with friends, other women. There was like 4 or 5 women in her class. They would drive from Tampa to St. Pete or DeLand, I think it was. I think it was St. Pete at the time, and like go to law school. And they all got little kids at home, and their husbands were taking care of them and getting us to and from our activities and cooking dinner. And during finals week, my mom was gone for a week because didn't have time to do the drive back and forth because you're studying. And she had a chip on her shoulder where she graduated, finally got a job, which was really hard because, as she said, she would apply to the big firms and all this stuff. And she said, I'm not getting a job because I'm short, fat, and Jewish, and I'm a woman. And that just kind of put a chip on her shoulder. She ended up clerking on the old Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is the court right below the U.S. Supreme Court. At the time, it was Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Texas, and Louisiana. They split that court into 2. Now there's the new 11th, which is Florida, Georgia, and Alabama, and then the rest stayed with the old Fifth Circuit. But the reason I share that with you is once you get that job, you can write your ticket. Big firm will take you, right? And she left that clerkship and went and opened her own civil rights practice and took every case in town that nobody else wanted. And this is back in the day when she would represent women for being fired for being pregnant. That all the just civil rights work, whether it was representing a gay man that was in the Air Force, stellar record in the Air Force, long before Don't Ask, Don't Tell, long before. And he had a landlord-tenant dispute. He was the tenant with his landlord because he lived off base, and his landlord turned him in to the Air Force and said he was gay, and they dishonorably discharged him. and she battled that case and figured out that she could sue the Secretary of the Air Force in D.C. because that was a more favorable jurisdiction than, the 11th Circuit at the time in
Sure.
Florida, if it goes up on appeal, which we knew it would. So she just did some brilliant work. The big move came when I was a junior in high school, going into my junior year. She got a job offer to run for 2 years an organization called Southern Legal Counsel in Gainesville, Florida, a couple hours north of Tampa, where we lived. Dream job, representing kids with disabilities, defending and advocating for their individual education plans, which is called the IEP. And she was like, I can't take this job. She came home and told my dad, I just got this job offer, but Seth is a junior. He's got 2 more years. My dad just got a gig for a year in Fort Myers to be in administration at USF.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are we going to do? And so I told them no. And my dad said, Alice, his wife, did what every good feminist does. And she listened to her husband when he said, take the fucking job. That's your dream job. You've got to take it. And we'll figure out. Seth's 16 years old. We don't see him anyway. He's going to soccer. He's doing
right.
Like, we'll figure it out. And we figured it out. And she went on to have a stellar career. There's an organization called COPA, which brings together parents, advocates, lawyers, health professionals, everybody to work on the Individual Disability Education Act, which is a federal law that created the IEP that I just discussed. And probably her biggest legacy in the law is they named a mentoring award after her, after she passed, and gave it to her, posthumously the first year.
Mm-hmm.
My dad accepted on her behalf, about mentoring young lawyers. And that just always stuck with me. And that's one of the most favorite things that I do as a lawyer is mentor the younger lawyers.
Did you ever have a chance to hear how your mom would characterize you as a lawyer?
We would talk about our cases. She loved doing that. And I loved talking the law with her. It was a lot of fun. I think what was most impressive to my mom about me, tangentially might have to deal with being a lawyer because I do divorce work, is the fact that my former spouse and I were so close, and how we had no issues raising our son, even though he was 2.5 when we dissolved our marriage.
Yeah.
That was the one thing that she would tell me, like, I'm really proud of you. You guys, both of you, have always done right by my grandkid. But my parents also played a role in that, because sometimes there would be a family event and I would say, no, I'm not bringing Kai because it's Nancy's weekend or her family will be in town. And I think that I don't even want to ask, because I don't even want there to be a potential for conflict.
Yeah.
And if that meant we went without, but in the long run, it worked out. And she would hear her friends that kids got divorced and they didn't get to see their grandkids, right? This is what we talk about. We talk about our families.
Yeah.
And I think that was probably the most impressive thing that she shared with me, that she felt about me, which has a lot to do with my former spouse. And the reason I say it might be connected, because I do this divorce work all day, every day. And I'm like, I'm not bringing that home.
Well, we talked about your mom, your dad as an academic. I'm interested in what you find now that it's, as you say, it's been a couple of years, but not that long
Right.
since you lost your folks, and I'm curious what you think about that they left you that no one else can see.
Almost every morning, I make my wife coffee, and I bring her coffee when she's still in bed, because I get up earlier. I'm getting ready for work, and we call it coffee service. So,
Adorable.
in the morning, I'll be like, "Do you want coffee service?" She says, like, "Yes." Okay. If I'm too early, because I'm out early, no. So, my dad did that to my mom for many, many years, as long as I can remember. And we sit down, and for 5 or 10 minutes, we just chat about, hey, get out our calendars. What's going on? What do you have today? It's just a way for us to connect. We don't have our screens up. We just have a conversation over coffee. And I just think that's so valuable because some days, like yesterday, that was the only time I spent with her all day
You see
because
her, you give her coffee in bed, and the next time you see her, you're in bed.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And because I worked all day, and then I had a client dinner afterwards, and I got home at 8:30, and she was home, but I'm like a in bed asleep by 9 kind of guy, like, and so that was really almost it. Um,
Yeah.
and so I think that's something that people don't see. Um, and as I get older, and I'm 55 this year, uh, really all I want to do is spend time with my family and friends. Like that's what I want to do. And my son just came home for spring break, by way of example. And my dad, whenever we came home for spring break, he would be wearing um, University of Wisconsin Oshkosh paraphernalia, where I went to undergrad and played college soccer up in Wisconsin. But um, uh, and I find myself all the time wearing uh, my son's college, merch, or my
Yeah.
stepson's college merch, especially if they're in town. I'm wearing it. I have a coffee cup collection of all the nieces and nephews and where they went to college. And so in the morning when I have the coffee or at the office and I go to get a mug, I'll think about them. And
Yeah.
they don't know that I do. Sometimes I'll take a picture of it and be like, just thinking about you. So there's things
Yeah.
like that that I really get from my dad that I don't think people really know.
I when Dad died, it didn't really hit me immediately that one of the things that I think he's given me just by the process of going through grieving for the loss of that relationship is I feel like I finally understand empathy in a way that I didn't really before. How and that's impacted every part of my job. It impacted my relationship with my wife, relationship with my kids, and
Right.
their journey right
That's right.
now. And it's changed the way I think about my work. Right, I wouldn't be doing this show if it weren't for this sort of obsession with figuring out how other people feel. And I'm curious how you feel like your grieving process impacted your job, which puts a spotlight on helping other people through grieving.
Yeah. Well, with my dad, it was different. When my mom passed, we were worried going through the grieving process of her death through cancer at the end.
Mhm.
And but a lot of the focus is, what are we going to do about dad? What are we going to do about dad? You know,
Yeah.
and so you have to worry about the other parent, and you kind of change roles, parent, child. Child becomes parent and caregiver. And I remember two things about that specifically. There's a lot, but I think relevant to this discussion. One was, my dad was just helpless. He's in a wheelchair. He can't get up by himself, and helping him, get dressed and all this stuff. And he goes, and we're at the hospital and back and forth. And he goes, God, I just feel so helpless. And, um, and I said, "'Cause you are." And I just started laughing, and so did he. I said, "'Cause you are. Without anyone else here, you're fucked." Like, and he just started,
Son.
he just started laughing, and I just got him to laugh through this whole process. Like, let's just acknowledge. Don't feel you are, but you raised me, and here we are dealing with this. And my brother was there as well. It wasn't just me, and my sister-in-law, and my wife, and my uncle, my dad's brother, was there on, he's a doctor, so all medical calls, and my cousin who's a doctor on medical call. Like, we're all there. My sister-in-law was helping on, she's an oncologist. So there's a lot of other people helping.
Yeah.
um and the other part was, he was always very concerned, like, "You're very busy at work. You're very busy at work." I'm like, "Yeah, but I have time to take you to the doctor. It might be a pain in the ass, and I might be on my phone when we're waiting for the hour to get called back. And I said, but let me be clear. I have not even scratched the surface on you carting me around to all those soccer games and soccer tournaments growing up. We're not even close. And he looked at me and he goes, you're damn right about that. Like, you know.
Like he'd had that one locked and loaded for about the last 30 years.
Yeah, right when I said it, I was like, so this is how it works and this is how you raised us. So but how it impacts my job is I work really hard at my job, and there is the attorney and counselor at law. The attorney is going to court, writing stuff, doing legal research, arguments, but the counselor at law is helping people through that process. And though I have empathy for them, I'm also really tough on them because I'm not your friend, I'm your lawyer. So sometimes people will say, well, my wife made it where I could never do X, Y, and Z. Or a wife might say, well, the husband made it where I wasn't allowed to spend. I'm like, no. Those are choices you made. You have to accept responsibility that you let yourself get to that position and then you ultimately acquiesced. Now, there might have been good reasons that you did that, but let's not be the victim anymore. Let's take responsibility for the choices that we made and the actions that we took, and you're no longer in that relationship and you're breaking the cycle, which is hard. So I'll work with them on that, but I always bring them back to it. Where I think it's really impacted my job is with the people that I work with. Because most people, like in your intro, I help people and I get very close with them. And some of them I still get holiday cards from. And sometimes I'll get pictures and be like, look at how they're growing up. One former client used to introduce me as I'm the one that saved his relationship with his kid because the mother wanted to move across the country. And I had to go to court and make the arguments, and the judge agreed with us. We're not moving across the country with this child. Those are really impactful. But I think it's the day-to-day on the people that I work with and understanding that I'm an empty nester and I live 7 minutes with lights, 3 minutes without getting red lights to work. And I've got team members here with little kids that are running around doing all the stuff I did when Kai was little. And it's fucking hard. And I just don't forget it. I just don't forget it when they're here working. And I've got other team members that are single with no kids, but they have an hour commute because housing is expensive. And so just how you treat your team and how you kind of want to be remembered, I think is probably what I learned most from going through those processes of grieving and taking care of my elderly parents.
It's so interesting to talk about your mom, especially in the professional capacity, because your mom is almost exactly counter to my introductory thesis, right? That because her legacy is large and has a name on a building, and
so to speak, yeah, on that mentoring
so to
award.
speak, right,
yeah.
right,
Yeah.
and that is, I think, a stereotypical kind of impression of legacy is that large footprint that is written in books somewhere. I also think it's important that we at least find a way to challenge that cultural idea a little bit. And I since you've been thinking about the show for the last 7 days, what do you think we get wrong when we talk about legacy?
I don't think we get much wrong at all, quite frankly. In now thinking about that, because someone that donates money and has their name on a building is giving to people that the donor will never know. I was asked to do a pitch to raise money for my son's high school, and they had the Smith Black Box Theater was donated by a couple with the last name of Smith. The development director, because I was on the committee, said, hey, we're raising money for the school. We're going to have the event in the Black Box. I was wondering if you would do the pitch. Said, happy to. my son's a sophomore in high school now. I haven't thought of this in years, but here's what I said, and it answers your question where I'm saying we don't go wrong if you're giving money like that. And I just said, I have never met Mr. and Mrs. Smith. If they were sitting in this room, I would not even know them. Through their generosity, they have given my son the experience of theater and being on stage and creating an area where these high school and junior high school kids came together to learn about themselves and learn about acting and learn about different roles and how to analyze and music and theater. And they'll never know who my son is. And that gift continues to give day after day, year after year, decade after decade. And so, of course, we were trying to raise money for a new building. I said, and everyone in this room has benefited, and their kids have benefited from donors like them. And I'm asking you to do the same for kids that you will never know or meet. And I think if you're going to give and have the ability to give, to build a structure where people come together, whether it's a dorm, whether it's a cancer center, whether it's a stadium, whatever you're putting your name on, I think it's always a structure where people are coming together. And I think that's a good thing.
That's a pretty powerful anecdote. It reminds me, I mean, as we record this, obviously things are in Pete gestures largely. Things are in a bit of chaos, but the speech that has really kind of held my attention is these are the promises we make to each other. These are the commitments we make to each other. And in your case, these are the commitments we make to each other across a generation or more. That, you know, and it's what makes our work and our commitment, even if we aren't able to connect with one another, it makes it less invisible. It makes it resonant across decades.
Yeah. And it goes on and on and on. So the other thing that I was thinking about over the last week or so was, like, how would I want to be remembered?
Well, that's the last question I have for you, Seth.
I know, but I didn't know if you were getting to it or we're going to talk another 3 hours, because I'll keep going. So that was my little clue for you. Okay, I'll wait on it.
Look,
I'll wait on it.
I'm the host right now. Okay.
It's no different on the toaster.
Let's say your legacy is like a residue that you leave behind you like a snail.
Where people step on it and it's sticky and doesn't feel good.
Right. Disgusting.
Well,
look,
I got to tell you, I'm a little disappointed because you now know me so well. That was my answer. So now I'm going to have to come up with a different one.
Legacy is a residue. No, it starts with this question because I think right now at this stage in your life, people know you performatively. They come in contact with you when you're on stage, right? When you're in the courtroom, when you're in the act of practicing law. And I want to know first, as I build up to the big question, if people only knew you from the courtroom, what do you think they would misunderstand about you?
I'm not really an asshole.
It's just, that question was a setup to let you set the record straight.
Yes, I appreciate that. I have what a friend of mine who I knew for a long time, not as friends, but I took her deposition. We were acquaintances, and she knew my mother from politics way back when. And she has defined that I have what she calls my deposition voice, right? Where I'm just like tearing in. Okay. So that would be one thing I would say, that I'm not really an asshole. And I'm not trying to downplay this, not like just doing my job.
Yeah.
But I'm a zealous advocate, as I'm required to be. If we can't solve the problem and we're going to court, game fucking on. Let's go.
All right.
So.
All right, let's do it. This is it. If your clients are writing their obituaries about you, your son is looking back, trying to figure out what he understands about you in the wake of your passing, what is it that is written on your headstone?
So I think my clients are different. than my son and family and colleagues. So
Okay.
I
You
think
don't get
from a
2
client,
headstones, Seth.
well, yeah, I got a pretty big ego, so maybe I might need to.
You got one at each side?
Yeah,
Don't we get a
exactly.
footboard?
So I just think generally not on my headstone, but for clients, like, was he honest with me? Did he play it straight? Did I tell my client, this is what I think, this is how I think this is going to come out. Here's my advice and counsel. Was I clear in what I'm advising you and why? And did I absolutely do my best work for every single case that I have? And never promise you an outcome, because I can't guarantee what a judge will decide. Right.
Sure.
So that would be kind of that one. Now for my friends, and colleagues and my son and family is, every morning or every interaction I had with them, was it making my life better, right? When I work with my colleagues, I'm trying to mentor and make their life better. If whether it's through laughter and having a good time or supporting them, but was I generous, not just in money but in time, and I think you and I have talked about this. What's important to people by where they spend their time and their money. And I want both those things to kind of be in the service of others. Now, listen, that doesn't mean that I don't go buy a fancy car like I just did. I'm not saying it has to be 24/7, 365. You're allowed to enjoy life, right?
Yeah.
You're allowed to enjoy life, but
Sure.
in your interactions, I think I would like to be remembered as generous in my time and giving and making people's lives better and thoughtful, or any of those nice adjectives. But if not, schmuck works.
Well, I'll tell you what, and why I'm so, I mean, I think it's a testament to you showing up here. I mean, and I recognize, like, this is a weird conversation for us to have on a podcast. It is an act of vulnerability to even show up, and that is, that is a thing that I hold so highly in my respect for you, is that when you show up, you show up. And it is just an act of great respect. And I deeply appreciate our relationship over the years, and I'm grateful to be in your orbit, man.
Yeah, I could just repeat all those words right back to you, Pete. And it's an honor to call you as a friend. And I think really your intro speaks a lot, because people come in and out of our lives, and that's a bit of what happens in divorce. And I usually tell people that, look, you can look back and think about all the negative stuff that's happening, but there were good times there. Or you have a child, and you would do all this bullshit all over again if you knew when you were walking down that aisle or standing at the end of the aisle that this was going to end up in a 3-year litigation battle. But you have these kids, you would have still walked down and said yes. You still would have waited for her at the end of the aisle and said yes. So it's a lot of perspective. And I think people remember how you made them feel, whether they remember the specifics or not. And I hope that with the people that are close to me and care about, or complete strangers, that they'll have positive thoughts.
Seth Nelson doesn't stay in his clients' lives. He's not supposed to. But the thing about legacy is, it's not about staying. It's about showing up fully when it matters most, and leaving something behind, even if no one remembers your name. A conversation, a moment of peace, a sense that someone saw you clearly when everything else was falling apart. That's the kind of legacy that doesn't fade. It just changes shape and keeps moving forward. Thank you for subscribing to the show, for listening to it all the way. Thank you for your time and your attention. And thanks for hanging out with me right here around the Headstone.